Okay. Yeah, my name's Paul Blanche. I've been in the nuclear industry for over 55 years, starting with the United States Navy on submarines. I'm one of the nuclear experts that's willing to challenge the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and I've had many, many uh, communications with Nuclear Regulatory Commission over various issues. My credibility is at the top. I'm in the top five of critics. So most people believe what I say. Now, what I'd like to start out with is the most dangerous way of when a reactor is uses its fuel up in the first year or two. Then they put it in a spent fuel pool, and the initial design was the Department of Energy was going to take it, and they were going to take possession of it by 1998. Uh, and they were going to take it and store it in Yucca Mountain in Nevada. And they spent $15 billion on trying to develop a solution for the long term storage geological burial at Yucca Mountain. President Obama and others essentially nixed that. So we don't have a long term solution.
If I may ask, why did President Obama, of all people, who is, you would think would be the most concerned of presidents, why did he
Well,
make?
I think a lot of it was political, but there are technical issues. There was a lot of political pressure from Nevada, from Senator Harry Reid, who was majority leader, I think, or minority leader. He took a very strong position. We don't want that stuff in Nevada. And Obama essentially killed that idea of placing that into geological storage, both for political and for technical reasons.
Personally, do you think that it was a bad idea or a good idea?
I don't know. I don't think there is a solution right now. I think that we could safely store it for maybe 10,000 years. Uh, Congress said, Department of Energy said, you got to safely store it for 250,000 years. There are technical problems, but we've got to get rid of this stuff. Was Yucca Mountain the best solution? It's the best I know about. Is it absolutely safe? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen 200,000 years from now. But anyway, Yucca Mountain is out of the question. Europeans, China's doing some more research into geological burial. The problem is that the spent fuel, which we've been producing it since, the early 1960s, has built up in these spent fuel pools, which are about a cube, about 30 feet on a side, and they're just loaded with spent fuel from the nuclear reactors. And this has been going on, as I say, since 1965. And the danger there is they're just so tightly packed. There are many dangers, but the biggest danger is if we lose cooling to those spent fuel pools, then we have a meltdown of the spent fuel, and most likely we will have a fire called the zirconium fire, which is a chemical reaction, which will cause the radioactive material, which is horrendous, to be dispersed over a large area. Some people have projected, including the NRC, an area exceeding 9,000 square miles, the size of Pennsylvania, Connecticut combined.
Well, this would be an explosion.
Fuel heats up once the water is gone, and once it heats up, it ignites through a zirconium hydrogen reaction and essentially melts the fuel and disperses it to the atmosphere. So we've gotten to the point where we all agree that continuing storage in the spent fuel pools is the most unsafe thing you could do. Now, a lot of people, somewhat including myself, say there's a better way to do it, is to take it out of the spent fuel pools and put it into what is called dry cask storage. And instead of having one huge 30-foot cube, you've got individual canisters that are 20 foot high, 6 foot in diameter, 7 foot diameter. So any accident that occurs with these dry canisters, the inventory of each individual canister is much lower than the inventory in a spent fuel pool. So an accident, a terrorist attack, or anything else would be minimized such that we would not have the need for a large area of evacuation. We don't have the actual figures. I've been communicating with the NRC, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We don't have figures of actually what the damage is or what the evacuation area is.
The word inventory. So each of these canisters then contains multiple of these quote unquote spent fuel rods.
Yeah, they hold about, I want to say up to 30 or 35 fuel rods that are about 8 inches by 8 inches, and they're all stacked vertically in this canister. Right now, I'm primarily concentrating on San Onofre and Indian Point, some of the plants back here in the Northeast, but we have plants in different stages. We have some plants that are being decommissioned. Decommission means that we're taking down the entire plant, we're taking all the fuel out of the spent fuel pools, and we're moving it into dry cask storage, which is essentially stored locally and on site, like at San Onofre in Southern California.
Will these canisters be buried? That is, will they be in underground chambers?
There are different designs. At San Onofre, because the Coastal Commission at San Onofre did not want, if you drive by on Route 5 between Los Angeles and San Diego, you can see the big domes. The Coastal Commission said, if you're going to store spent fuel pool, we don't want to see it. So they worked with the company to design these canisters that are in the ground. The top is level with the ground. That all the fuel from San Onofre has been removed to these canisters that are stored vertically in the ground with the top exposed. We have other plants, operating plants, like if we take Millstone or Indian Point plants that I've both worked at, because we needed more room, we have maybe 25 to 50% of the fuel in dry cask and the other 50% in the spent fuel pools. Now, you mentioned an electromagnetic pulse, and I've studied, and it's a scary scenario. An electromagnetic pulse, if it does what I read, would probably not do any significant damage to the dry storage. It would cause a loss of power to the spent fuel pools, and if it persisted long enough, and it would have to persist for a few days, we would have major releases wherever this EMP caused loss of power outage. Would this be the worst problem? I'm not sure. From an EMP, it's pretty significant. This is one of the small events.
You have to bring the grid down for a few days before enough of the water evaporated that it was a problem.
That is correct. It's, even if we lost all power on site and couldn't get it back, it would still take 2 or 3 days, depending on how much fuel is in there. We wouldn't even have automobiles to evacuate because of the EMPs.
I mean, I was under the impression that we might have a couple of weeks. That I think I was told that there are a couple of weeks of bunker fuel kept on site by which they could fire up generators and keep the pools cool for that length of time.
Well, that is true, but you got to realize that these diesel generators are also controlled by electronics, which would also be impacted by an EMP. So just like your car is controlled by electronics, these diesel generators are controlled by electronics. If I have a 55 Ford, it might run, but something in newer technology is not going to work.
Well, I guess I didn't understand the EMP concept correctly. I thought it would take down something that was working, but what you're telling me is it will take down something that's turned off as well.
Oh yes, it'll take down everything. It'll take down the internet. It'll take down airplanes. It'll disable everything. You wouldn't be able to start your car. It's horrible. There's a book out there on EMP.
Is the EMP device itself a nuclear device?
As envisioned, it's a nuclear device that's exploded about 30 miles above the surface and then has a radius of about 500 miles. It's very scary. If one wanted to read about it, there's a book, it's a novel called 1 Second After, and it's very scary what it does.
Do these devices exist?
Yes, they do. Not, no one will admit that they exist, but yes, they exist. All you have to do is detonate a nuclear weapon at an elevation, and it will produce that EMP, and it could be used by any state-sponsored organization. I don't think that your local terrorist is going to be able to do it, but we have bad actors out there that have nuclear weapons.
Who would you suspect has these EMP devices?
Everyone that has nuclear weapons.
So Israel would have it, China would have it.
The biggest scary one would be North Korea, though.
Storing anything on the California coast has to make you worry with discussions about the San Andreas fault line in California tipping off into the ocean.
What I'd like to try to do is, about the operating plants still have spent fuels pools, and they're vulnerable to a lot of different things, from earthquakes, EMPs, to terrorism, to leakage, to dropping heavy loads, and so on and so forth. So most plants still have that, but every plant has dry cask storage. Now, dry cask storage, at San Onofre, there's 73 of these devices, vertical devices, buried in the ground with the top at ground level 108 feet from the Pacific Ocean. As a consultant, someone having worked with spent fuel and nuclear plants for most of my life, there are, and I've studied all the documentations, there are very significant risks. I want to clarify. A risk is a product of the probability of the event times its consequences. Now, the risk of a spent fuel pool is very high. The risk of an accident with a dry cask is much, much lower. Now, that sounds good, sounds great. And it's lower, not because the probability is lower, but the consequences are lower. That the amount of radioactive material released in an accident or terrorist attack is going to be significantly lower. We don't know, and the NRC cannot tell us what the consequences are from a rupture of the spent fuel casks. If someone looks up on the web, on spent fuel cask, you'll see all kinds of pictures of these designs, both above ground and in the ground. They're, again, 5, 6 feet in diameter, 20 feet high. And they're filled with helium gas, and they have natural conduction airflow around them. And on the surface, everything looks fine. But when you begin studying exactly what's their vulnerability to events, you find out that they're not quite as robust as most people think. And as a expert witness for a public interest group called Public Watchdogs, I've done considerable research on the vulnerability of dry casks. And I'm on 2 issues right now, and we're working with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to try to get resolution. And like any regulatory agency, they're impossible to work with. And it's been documented by the Inspector General that I'll use the proper words, they have misrepresented information they have supplied to me. They are a captured regulatory industry regulator.
What do you mean a captured regulator?
Many of these regulatory agencies, like the FAA, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the FDA, they're more or less, and PHMSA, Department of Transportation, they're more or less, what they do is controlled by the people that they regulate. The people that they regulate really are calling the shots because there's a lot of money here. And it's almost every regulatory agency, and it's commonly referred to as captured agencies.
I hadn't heard the term, but I just call it corruption.
We look at San Onofre, and now their spent fuel pool, all their fuel has been taken and put in these casks. So I'm working for public watchdogs, and the citizens around the area are concerned. What's the danger? Number one, being 108 feet away from the Pacific Ocean, and if they are flooded by a storm surge, which is got a high probability, I'm talking 1 in 50 years. If they're flooded with a storm surge, then it's a disaster for them. You've got 73 of these devices flooded. Water's going to boil off the water that came in. It's going to deposit salt. It's going to block all cooling. It's going to overheat the fuel. And it's going to breach the containers of the fuel due to thermal cycling or due to high pressure. We're going to have 73 accidents with these. Now, again, how severe is it going to be? We don't know. I'm trying to find out. There is going to be a release. Is there going to be an evacuation? I believe there will be. Now, that's San Onofre. There's another concern, and this just came to my attention, and again, I'm working against the NRC to get a resolution and filing a formal petition. Part of my expertise is understanding the regulatory framework and how it works.
I like the way you say it. I'm not working with the NRC to get it resolved. I'm working against the NRC to get it resolved.
We try to work together, and there's a lot of good people in the NRC. Believe me, there are. But the culture from the top is pretty bad. But the thing that I uncovered this week and been working today on it is the fact that these canisters are 1/2-inch thick steel, 5-foot diameter, 20-foot high, and they're welded. They're welded along the seam, they're welded at the bottom, and they're welded at the top. And they are guaranteed, whatever that means, for 25 years.
Well, in my personal belief, it's not practical to repair a canister if it were damaged.
And in the country right now, there's about 6,000 of these things scattered throughout the country holding high-level spent fuel. So I went ahead and found in my research where the regulatory requirement says these must be assured leak tightness, and if it leaks, you've got to know about it. In the licensing documents, I find the words throughout the licensing documents that any leakage from these canisters is not credible. Those are the exact words. There is nothing that is not credible.
Somewhere in the documentation you've read, it says that it's impossible for them to leak.
No, it doesn't say impossible. It says leakage is not credible. They don't define what credible means.
I know. That's why I asked. I tried repeating it in.
I know.
It's not credible. In other words, you're lying if you're saying it's leaking.
It's impossible to state that something is not credible. You know, what would you say if Tesla came out and said, our cars killing anyone is not possible. Yeah, there's always a probability that says something's going to happen. It already has. I mean, we've had incredible accidents. TMI was an incredible accident, or not credible, never considered.
It's 3 Mile Island.
3 Mile Island, I'm sorry. Fukushima, 3 Mile Island was not a credible accident. Chernobyl was not an accident that was ever considered a possibility. I mean, we go on and on. There was an accident 30 years ago that killed 8,000 people in Bhopal, India. Never considered credible.
You're talking about the American cyanides
Yeah,
gas.
I think that's what it was. So for them to have a requirement that these have to be leak tight, and the only thing they say is that leakage is not credible, is an absolute lie to me. So I filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and we got a response. And my Freedom of Information Act request stated, I want to see your analysis that says these are not credible. What they give back to me, we got it yesterday, was a response to my Freedom of Information Act request. And all it is this piece of paper that says leakage is not credible.
There's no calculations. There's no
calculation. And I've run into, similar situations at Indian Point where we had a 42-inch gas line running adjacent to the plant. They didn't even say that it was incredible. You've got to quantify it by probability. It's 1 in a million years, 1 in 10 million years. You cannot say something's incredible. The industry, and this not only affects the U.S., it affects every plant in the U.S., and that's 55 site and 104 plants. It impacts what I just said about the non-leakage. It impacts most of the plants in Japan, France, not Italy. The Germans and the Swiss are doing it right.
It being dry cask storage is being
dry cask storage. They're, instead of a half-inch thick, they're making them 12 inches thick. Leakage is still credible, but we know the probability is way down.
But you're saying that some of the canisters, like the ones being used in the U.S., are just half-inch of steel.
That's correct. Well, they're encased and surrounded, but the pressure boundary is 1/2 inch. The only thing that is containing that pressure, and literally the most toxic substance on this earth, between us and between the fuel and the toxic substance and the environment, is 1/2 inch of stainless steel. The other thing is, because it costs a lot of money, they don't even monitor the pressure. They don't monitor the temperature. They don't monitor the radioactivity in the area. It's done at the most cost-effective means for the utilities to save money. And I'm not going to get into the financial aspects because I'm a technical person, but there's a lot going on, and this is a huge problem.
The current design should be abandoned for the design that you say is adequate, the 12 or more adequate, 12 inches of steel in containment.
Well, I say that, but I say it not with a whole lot of hope. That would be like saying, okay, you can't use cell phones anymore because they're doing brain cancer. We've got 6,000 of these devices deployed throughout the country, and they're thinking of adding another 10,000 in the Badlands of New Mexico. To do this, at least $5 to $10 million per canister. It's impossible. We're just kicking the can down the road. We're leaving it to the next generation to figure it out, which was what the previous generation did to us. I am the previous generation, but it's incredible what's being done.
You're using the word incredible.
Yeah, I know I am in a different.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful because it kind of shows how the NRC is engaging in doublespeak. You know,
Yeah.
they're using vague terms to say that Chernobyl was an incredible accident. It was not credible that you could anticipate it, but it happened. So you're not.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at any engineering disaster. You know, you look at the Hope Strait Bridge out there in Seattle back in the 40s when that thing just fell down, you know, due to winds and it was poor design. Was that ever credible? No.
Yeah, we are a species that our hubris is just incredible.
Yeah, we use that word too much and has different definition.
Yeah.
You know, I'm doing my best. My problem is I'm not going to be around here forever. Who's going to push these issues? There's a lot of public interest groups that are pushing these issues. They're not looked upon with any real credibility. They're, you know, referred to as tree huggers and so on and so forth. I say there's only 3 of us in this country that have any credibility and technical knowledge about what we're facing right now. And I'm not doing this for money.
It's your ethical commitment to doing the right thing.
I've got a passion for it, and I've got a passion for what the government is doing to us on this matter and other matters, of course. But right now, I'm focused on this. And
the idea of a rapid deployment cask and contain task force, that concept, is it something that you would consider a credible concept, that we could develop a technology such that you could contain these spent fuel rods in a nation that's been gifted with a nuclear power plant but can't really handle it when the foreign experts leave?
well, if you tell me the scenario they'd have to recover from, I could tell you whether it's possible or not. I don't know, you know, if there's a flooding scenario out at San Onofre, would a rapid response group do any good? It may, but you got to get the NRC and the utility, which is Southern California Edison, to say, hey, that's a possibility. Biggest problem we got to overcome is to have the NRC admit there is a problem. They say there's no problem.
But the final question I'd have, would you recommend that these canisters be exhumed, dug up?
A direct answer to your question. Not only would I recommend they get rid of those things that are thin wall casks that are buried in the ground, but that they move the fuel. I mean, there's 10 million people in a 50-mile radius there. They don't deserve to be put at risk from this nuclear. I think they ought to be put in thick wall cask and transported to this facility that is being considered out in Hobbs, New Mexico.
So there is a new repository that's being considered and engineered.
Yeah, it's a temporary repository in Hobbs, New Mexico, and proposed to have 6,000 to 12,000 casks. But again, it's the same type of thin wall cask, but the population density out there is pretty close to 0.